Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with an absolutely wonderful disc on Ivory Classics featuring Earl Wild, the inimitable Earl Wild. Earl Wild with the American String Orchestra under Isaiah Jackson in his own blown-up arrangements of the Schumann and Dohnányi piano quintets. The Schumann Piano Quintet in E-flat major, Opus 44, and Dohnányi's Piano Quintet in C minor, Opus 1. This is a wonderful disc. I remember reading some rather snippy reviews about it, particularly from pianists who are into the Schumann, taking objection to writing for larger forces. But I also remember that Tovey, the great Donald Francis Tovey, talked about these works by Schumann and said that Schumann's part writing was so messed up. Part writing meaning the independence of instrumental voices, that the quintet really wasn't a quintet at all. It should have been like a piano trio or something when you consider how many parts are really there as opposed to how he divides them up. I don't know. I'm not an expert in classical part writing, and I don't really care. What I care about is that both of these works sound marvelous in these arrangements because, piano quintets, or piano quartets for that matter, such as, remember the Brahms Piano Quartet, blown up by Arnold Schoenberg into this fabulous kind of bizarre pseudo-Brahmsian quasi-modern symphony thing. Well, you've got basically, when you have a quintet, you have the piano, which can make a complete massive harmony all by itself, right? The piano is like an orchestra. You've got 10 fingers. All of them can hit a different note. You can make really nice, big, full, rich harmony and play in multiple parts without any problem. Whereas the strings tend to naturally be treated as their own independent unit. So it's the piano versus the strings. Of course, there are going to be wonderful combinations with a couple strings versus the piano, or the strings have the solo, and the piano is just accompanying, and all that stuff happens. But you can reverse that balance of tone without doing significant damage to the work, as often as not, and with a little bit of careful arranging, preserve the solo qualities from the string ensemble that you want to preserve, and the piano does what the piano does. So instead of a quintet for piano and strings, where you have these two, unequally balanced, but opposed ensembles, you wind up with what's almost a concerto for piano with string orchestra accompaniment, where the orchestra, of course, gets the primacy of place sometimes, and the piano is in charge sometimes. It works. The bottom line is they work. You may have aesthetic reservations about either doing damage to the composer's original intentions, it's a matter of taste, or you may find that there are certain aspects of the work that you appreciate more in the intimacy of a chamber setting that get ruined when you do it with larger forces. Again, it's a matter of taste. I think that they work both ways. I just enjoy hearing them both ways. And one of the things that sort of fascinates me about projects like this, as with the Schoenberg and the other stuff, is that there was a time in the 19th century when everything was reduced to chamber forces, because the only way you heard these pieces was to play them at home. And that meant you had to do them either for piano, a keyboard, and a couple other instruments. The Haydn symphonies arranged for piano trio, things like that. Everybody was making smaller arrangements for the purpose of making performance possible in a domestic setting before the days of recordings. Now, it's just the opposite, because you can record anything. And also because there are fabulous orchestras everywhere, always looking for repertoire by major composers who apparently didn't write enough. So the twin forces of the availability of recordings, the availability of large forces, the search for interesting repertoire, all militates in favor of making these larger arrangements of chamber pieces to make them more popular, which is fascinating because it means that our consumption of music is the opposite of what it used to be. It wasn't hearing things at home in small groups or going to chamber music concerts in small places. It's listening to recordings, to mass media, radio broadcasts, or going to large concert halls with thousands of people where you want to hear these pieces and you wouldn't ordinarily hear chamber music at all, because chamber music is now a niche, in the classical music world for the cognoscenti and the mass of people, even the mass of people who go to see symphony concerts normally wouldn't hear chamber works. So this serves a very useful purpose. Never mind the fact that it's Earl Wild. The performances are terrific. They're lively and fresh and shapely and tasteful, I might add, and just lovely. And the Dohnányi is going to be a rarity that a lot of people won't have heard. It's a very Brahmsian work. Brahms was said to have admired it and heard it and liked it. And when you arrange it for larger forces, it sounds even more Brahmsian. And the Schumann, of course, is a masterpiece and one that is still relatively unfamiliar, even to, I think, connoisseurs of chamber music. I mean, Schumann's chamber works are well, it's like a lot of Schumann. They sort of exist on the fringes, however fine they may be. Although the Quintet is one of his better known of all of those. But even like normal classical music people are not going to normally gravitate towards the Schumann chamber music, at least not at first. And they should hear these because they're wonderful. And so if you want to hear chamber works in loving arrangements for larger forces played to the nines by an ace pianist and his extremely fine pickup string ensemble group, boy, this is lovely. And it's on Ivory Classics. Give it a shot. Thanks for listening. Keep on listening and take care.